Hello and welcome to our session. So the next 45 minutes I will guide you through our hybrid scenario and deployment. Is it on? No? Here it works, huh? At least I can hear me loud. Whatever. So I have with me my colleague Valeria.
Hi.
So later on she will have a live demo then, and we will completely see the deployment. So what we want to have is shortly a little bit of a motivation, why we need hybrid deployment. Then I want to introduce you into the feature itself, so what kind of functionality we have in Cloud ALM, and then finally Valeria will show the demo, and we will see a complete deployment in a hybrid scenario. Okay, we have our disclaimer, and as always, use please hashtag ALM Summit if you want to go public with anything. Good. This is the picture that shows the complete business network, or let's say the SAP customer environment that we wish to see. And you can definitely see we have the foundation as a BTP, and on top of that there will be SAP systems, which means definitely we are talking about a mixture of on-premise systems, or at least maybe hosted systems, as well as real cloud systems. So it's always a mixture, and we also heard about that topic already from the session before, from Moritz, with a side-by-side approach or with this clean core approach. So the future should be like you're running cloud software, and you keep the core clean, and you do not extend extensively like we do today on ERP systems, where you have your own code and all of that stuff, but you will use APIs and have extensions on BTP. So with that, you will always run into this situation that you mix some cloud software as well as some on-premise software. Which means we have this kind of situation. So you have the on-premise or private cloud systems. We have these little houses here, which could be an S/4HANA, or in case of CTS Plus, for example, a native HANA system. And we have our public cloud on the other side. Nevertheless, of course, if you run complete end-to-end business processes that go completely across those systems, what you want to ensure, of course, is to have transports that are changed. Both systems are completely moving in sync. Because, I mean, if you change the, let's say, if you change the BTP system, and from the ERP, the change is still in the queue, and it would call the API, but the API is already changed. In the worst case, the whole system crashes. So the overall goal would be to be integrated and to really move through this kind of hybrid scenario in sync. The answer to that is the SAP Cloud ALM. You can see we sync with these columns those systems, how they belong together. And what I want to show you now is how we get to this sync. And then finally, as said before, Valeria will show you this live on the system. Very short introduction into Cloud ALM for implementation. So you've all heard several sessions meanwhile, and we were, of course, talking about exactly those topics. So we have a design functionality with this documentation and structuring of business processes. We have the build functionality, where you can have requirements and user stories. We have the testing 2 sessions already from Rainer, and there will be some sessions coming up. And finally, the deploy functionality, which we're talking about right now. So the vehicle that we will use in Cloud ALM deployment is called a feature. So those of you who know it from Solution Manager, using changes, or those of you who are using focus build, work item, exactly this object is called a feature in Cloud ALM. And what is a feature? So a feature fulfills, of course, several functionalities. First of all, it's a vehicle to deploy functionality. Also, it's the vehicle to move through the landscape. And if the landscape is heterogeneous, or let's say consists of several tracks, then it's as well an orchestrator. We also have this little container here, so overall it's as well, of course, a container to collect data and to, for example, have approvals on top. And as well, it follows a certain documentation line, which means with each and every status going through the system landscape, you can store your technical documentation, as well as, of course, we would log exactly the history and each and every steps which is performed, so that later on you have a full trace of what was happening, performing a change. From the workflow point of view, this is the standard delivery. We've already heard from Moritz that, well, it's planned to have an enhancement to change the standard workflow, as well as we will offer an API to extend this workflow in BTP with the workflow engine. Nevertheless, this is the standard which we have right now, starting by the status in specification. So that is the starting status. As soon as you would create a feature, you can switch back to not planned if a feature is postponed. But to go forward, we would switch it to in implementation, where you would then create transport requests or assign existing transports from cloud or from on-premise. Then we would switch to in testing at the same time, of course, beforehand, trigger our deployment to the QA system. And finally, if the test was successful, set the next status, which means ready for production. Of course, we have this normal ping pong, which means from in testing, of course, you can switch back to in development until you have reached a successful test. And finally, then go for ready for production, which is as well our approval step to ensure that you can deploy into production. Finally, if you have had deployed into production, the final status would be deployed. In the overall environment of, what we said, requirement, user story, defect defect corrections from the test area, and the feature. So the highlighted one is what we do with the feature. So we are only part of the overall ecosystem. You can completely use that standalone, meaning you just don't care about this ecosystem. Nevertheless, of course, this ecosystem exists, and you can, for example, step by step, enhance this flow and introduce testing later on, or the usage of requirements later on, more or less. In reality, it's the other way around, that we would start with solution documentation, then have the requirements, and maybe then use the feature. But what you see in this grayed out area is that there's a lot of linkage in between, which means there are dependencies between those documents. So you could link a feature to be created from a requirement, for example, or with a user story. Or if you switch to the test, which is here deployed to QAS, you could link via the requirement a test case, and only if the test case is successfully tested, you would switch to approval for production. As those of you who heard Moritz, this is not very restrictive today, but is planned to be more restrictive in the future, but anyway, it's flexible to set those statuses, right? From a transportation point of view, meaning what kind of deployments have we integrated? You can see our Cloud ALM here in the middle. So this is the core. And what we can do is take over transports from ABAP-based systems, if they are in the cloud, or if they are, well, let's say hosted, so it's a private cloud, or if they are on-premise, doesn't matter. We can access the cTMS framework and by this manage transports in that way. On top of that, we as well have available for the public cloud the connection to the ATO. And in the public cloud, with all the other SAP products, which are really native public cloud systems, we can do today via Cloud TMS, BTP, as well as brand new the SAP Analytics Cloud. So what we will see in this example now will be a mixture of the S/4HANA using CTS and the BTP. This is pretty much a example what we've also seen from Moritz's side. So this is how a feature looks like with the usual detailed information on attributes like priority and short text, and we have of course a text log and all that stuff. The important part here now is the transports. So here we have, in this example as said, a transport from S4 system using, for example, a customizing change, and on top of that, a BTP change, which is a CPI in our case. And as you see, both transports are inside one feature. So this is exactly the feature which is the vehicle to have this synchronization and to ensure this synchronization, that we are moving through the landscape in an exact synchronous way. On top of that, you can have a framework around those features, which is using so-called deployment plans and releases. So we can plan certain feature deliveries so that they are bundled and that they somehow belong together. So especially the deployment plan is important, as this is the main entity to explain what system groups belong together. So in this other picture, you can see this is exactly as well our example. So we have our S4 system and the CPI. So these are the two system groups that we define to be together in this deployment plan. And the releases that follow that deployment plan is only the time frames where we want to deliver. And in Moritz's example, it was already like a release like every month, and within that one release you could have 2 weekly sprints, and this is exactly how we would work here. Finally, just to overall explain you what a feature does, we have of course traceability, which means in this traceability report here we can exactly see what is the feature status, what are dependent objects, in which status are dependent objects. Do we have our test cases in the correct status? Do we have our project tasks which are linked in the correct status? And this is a very nice monitor to control the overall health of a deployment plan, as well as, of course, of your project. With that, please come back to the stage, Valeria. So let's look into a live demo now.
Yes. This is where the fun starts, right? So we will be very brave today, and we will deploy across different tracks. In our demo landscape, as you can see, we have on the one hand side, we have the cloud integration. This is the integration suite. It's called also CPI. It has two tenants, a development tenant and a production tenant. And we will be moving changes between the tenant by using Cloud TMS and Cloud ALM. And on the other side, we have a S4HANA system with three development clients, development client, quality assurance client, and a productive client. And we will be moving the changes there by using CTS. As you can already hopefully see, we have a two-system landscape and a three-system landscape. That means that today we will also show you how Cloud ALM is able to manage uneven landscapes. Now let's go to the system and navigate to the Cloud ALM for implementation and start with the projects. For the demo, we prepared a project, and this is a implementation project for S4HANA Private Edition, and we assigned the following system groups. We have S4HANA, we have the CPI, and we also have success factors, because in today's example, we're going to implement a requirement to integrate S4HANA and success factor for employee data synchronization by using the integration suite. I already prepared a requirement, so let's navigate to the requirements overview. So this would be our starting point. And out of this requirement, I will create a feature. So for demo purposes, I will just copy the description from the requirement. And so see how easy it is to create a feature. And out of the requirement, we can navigate to the newly created feature. And first thing first would be to start the implementation, because we want to create some transports. So now the status switches to implementation. And the first thing we would do is to create a customizing transport in our S4HANA system. Just let me put a owner ID. We have our export tenant, which is this S4H 701. This would be our development client. And as a target, we're going to have S4H 702, which is going to be our quality assurance system. Let's just move to the transports. As you can see, now the status is creation pending. This is due to the fact that basically now we have a kind of a list on the Cloud ALM side with transports that needs to be created, and then there will be a batch job which is going to be run on the managed system, which is going to fetch the list, and we'll create the transport. To save some time, this would maybe take a few seconds. Let's go to the integration suite. This would be our source tenant, and go to the integrations. Or maybe refresh first. And I already prepared a demo integration package. So this tenant is integrated with Cloud TMS. That means that we have a very nice button which is called transport. And this is how we basically are going to export the content, and we're going to create a transport which will be available in Cloud TMS. Let's just put my user as a transport owner, because otherwise we're going to get a GUID as a transport owner ID, and we don't want that. Now the transport has been created. I will show you also later. It's available in Cloud TMS, and it's basically also released, and it's available to be imported into the target tenant. Now let's go back to our feature and refresh. And now, as you can see, the transport has been already created. So now we're going to do a journey into the past and open a GUI and log on basically to our development system. And now we will do a S/4HANA change. I will just go to SM30 because I'm a fan of shortcuts. And I have the view where I want to make a change. This is basically a view where we can change address types. This is something we will need for the SuccessFactors integration. As the info type, I will need addresses because we want to change address types. For employee data, and for example, let's take the one with headquarters, 87, and just put a company address instead. Now I can save my change, and of course you get the pop-up for a transport request. As we already have created one, it is available in the list, can be selected. So now we record the change into the transport request. And now there is one more thing we need to do before we go back to the feature. This is like similar in charm. This would be to go to the transport organizer and release the task. All right, we are done here. So now let's go back to the feature. And let me just refresh first. And now we can trigger the release of the transport. So here it applies the same, like when creating the transport request, the release is scheduled and will be done by a batch job in the managed system. And now let us assign the integration suite transport we created earlier. So basically I'm switching into the edit mode and press the assign button. And as you can see, 757, this was the transport we created before and exported from the integration suite tenant. So I will choose this one and we'll assign it. And now, as you can see, in the meantime, we have both transports released, also the one we created in S4H. So now we can trigger the deployment into the quality assurance system. And you remember we have an uneven landscapes. That means that we are not ready yet to do a production import into the CPI tenant, because we have only 2 tenants here. That's why the system now will trigger an import into the quality assurance client of the S4 system. All right, so deployment has been scheduled. So maybe we can, in the meantime, navigate to the import queue. So now I'm in the quality assurance client. Let me refresh first. All right, as you can see here, I mean, the transport is released. It's waiting to be imported, so it may take a few seconds. Already running, not there yet. Bear with me. Now it has been imported, and now I will go back to the feature and we'll hand it over to test. So now the feature can be tested. That means we will go back to our quality assurance system and we will navigate to our view. And we'll check if the change we did in the development system has been correctly transported. All right, we can see the change is there. The info type, the address type has been changed to company address. So that means that with that, our test have been successful and we can approve the feature for production. Because this is also something Moritz showed you yesterday, I believe, that you cannot do a productive deployment before you do not approve the feature for production. All right. And now we can do the productive deployment. So now the pop-up would be different because now we will do 2 deploys. The one will be in the production system S/4HANA 703, and the other one will be in our CPI production tenant. right? So you can see the deployment was scheduled in both targets. And now let me briefly show you how it looks like in Cloud TMS. So from Cloud ALM, we have a tile where we can jump straight to Cloud TMS. So we have a very nice overview about the transports in our node. So let me navigate and change the filter because we are only interested in transports that have been created today. Okay, maybe it's still running. Let me change. Yes, so this one is still running. In the meantime, let us check the TMS in the S4H system. Refresh first, go down. It's imported successfully. So now let's go back to Cloud TMS, or maybe to the feature. Let's see if also we have, yes. This is a very good thing. So basically we were able to deploy in a synchronous way in a S4H system and also in CPI. And that means that now we are done and we can confirm the deployment and we can close the feature, set it to deploy. All right, with that, we are at the end of our session and now we have some time for Q&A.
Yep.